General Ivan Bovoltsev, head of the Russian military's main administration of combat training of the Russian armed forces, wrote an May 11 article in the Russian military newspaper Krasnaya Zvezda. Bovoltsev also said the title may be given to forces including motorized rifle troops, tank units, marines, airborne, air assault and other units and subunits. This use of shock is apparently designed to recognize subunits, units, and formations that demonstrate a higher degree of training and performance. David Glantz, a retired U.S. Army colonel and expert on the Russian military, told the National Interest. The emphasis here is on improving force readiness. Glantz, perhaps the foremost Western historian of the Soviet military in World War II, explained that the shock army concept predates World War II. Actually, the term shock army dates back to the early 1930s, when, according to field regulations, these were highly trained and reinforced armies designated to spearhead offensive operations. The task assigned to these armies was to create tactical penetrations through which mobile forces, initially cavalry, but later mechanized corps, were to conduct exploitation into the operational depths. Thus shock armies were to be battering rams that would blast a hole in enemy lines, through which armored units would fan out into the enemy's rear areas, severing supply lines and overrunning command posts and artillery batteries. It illustrates how sophisticated Soviet doctrine was for conducting army-level maneuver operations, at least on par with German blitzkrieg theory and far more advanced than American, British and French thinking at the time. Unfortunately, Stalin's purges of most every competent pre-war Soviet general, and the devastation of the German invasion in June 1941, rendered such operations beyond the Red Army's capacity in the early days of the Russo-German War. However, in December 1941 and January 1942, the Soviets created 4 shock armies to lead their winter counteroffensive. The 1st, 3rd and 4th shock armies were deployed near Moscow, where they threw back the German forces threatening the city. The 2nd shock army was deployed at Leningrad, where it was twice encircled and destroyed by the Germans in 1942. Its commander, Andrei Vlasov, was captured by the Germans and defected, becoming the commander of an anti-Soviet army raised by the Nazis. More successful was the 5th Shock Army, which reinforced the devastating Soviet counteroffensive at Stalingrad in December, and fought off attempts by the German 48th Panzer Corps to relieve the encircled 6th Army. Despite pre-war doctrine that called for shock armies to heavily reinforced and well-trained, wartime exigencies made the actual formations much more haphazard. First Shock consisted of hastily raised and deployed rifle brigades and meager tank support, while the other 3 shock armies fielded in late 1941 and early 1942 were made up of rifle divisions and tank brigades, leavened by the first several Soviet Guards Rifle Corps, Glantz said. The 5th Shock Army was the strongest, with an attached tank corps and Guards Cavalry Corps. The elite units of the Red Army in World War II were actually the Guards units, so designated because they had distinguished themselves in battle. By 1943,